Hey guys, tonight we take a leisurely stroll through Olympus. Not the mountain, mind you, but the celestial walk-in wardrobe of one of its most formidable goddesses. You're standing in a dim marble room, light flickering from oil lamps, watching Athena herself prepare for battle. She isn't rushing. She's very precise. A bronze breastplate is being polished with what looks suspiciously like goat spit. A single owl hoots from its perch on her shoulder, and a scroll hovers midair, listing what she still needs to grab. You probably won't survive this war. Not because of the spears or the monsters, but because trying to keep up with Athena's checklist would melt your mortal brain faster than you can say Parthenon. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from, and what time it is in your corner of the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're waking up early in Olympus. Not that time flows exactly up there, but Athena is already up and rifling through drawers. Her version of dawn is the subtle shimmer of stars behind clouds shaped like ancient wisdom. She's got a war council at noon, a minor skirmish by mid-afternoon, and maybe an ambush or two after dinner. So what to pack? First comes the breastplate, a thing of divine craftsmanship. The mainstream tale says Hephaestus forged it for her, each rivet blessed with logic. Unlike the other gods who mostly grabbed whatever was shiny, Athena insisted on both function and philosophy. Scholars still argue whether it was ever meant to deflect arrows or just deliver metaphorical clarity. Because, you see, when you're the goddess of wisdom and warfare, you can't just show up with your shirt on backwards. Next, she lays out her greaves, shin guards that would make any hoplite weep with envy. Bronze, of course, but polished to a mirror finish. Not because Athena is vain, heavens no, but because reflecting the enemy's own face just before smiting them is the kind of poetic justice she lives for. A quirky detail, tucked into the lining of her right boot, is a faded acacia leaf. Some say it's a nod to an old Ethiopian soldier who once impressed her with a riddle. Others claim it's just her version of a lucky penny. Nobody knows. She never says. Athena plays it close to the toga. Now, let's not overlook her war sash. Yes, she wears a sash. Not just for flair. It's embroidered with a running tally of major battles, minor disputes, and one very awkward diplomatic dinner where a trident was thrown. Every stitch tells a tale, and if you lean in, you can almost hear the thread whisper. Oh, and the bag. Not a purse, not a satchel, more of a celestial tote, really. It expands or contracts depending on her mood, and it never, ever loses its shape. Inside, the essentials begin to stack. A small folding spear, yes, really, several scrolls labeled Plans AF, and a pouch of coins minted in every major city-state from Troy to Thebes. And what's that jingling sound? Ah yes, tiny amulets clinking gently against a leather-bound notebook. Some charms are protection, others distraction. One might just be a portable labyrinth in case she needs to trap a minotaur mid-conversation. As she continues packing, she murmurs to herself in languages that haven't been spoken since the stars first aligned. Not out of habit, but because the syntax of strategy requires celestial grammar. That's the real reason no one can beat her in a debate. She literally speaks in perfect metaphysical subjunctive. Now here comes a little-known detail. Athena packs in layers. Not clothing layers, conceptual ones. She organizes her gear not just by purpose, but by outcome. Things to carry into a winning battle go in one pouch. Things to use when things go sideways. In a pocket that only appears if you admit defeat. It's very on-brand. Meanwhile, the owl, yes, that owl, is already annoyed. It has been with her through wars, wisdom contests, and at least one unfortunate flirtation with underwater diplomacy, don't ask. The bird's main role today? Judging her packing choices from a high perch and occasionally hooting in passive-aggressive Morse code. You watch Athena pause, mid-motion. Her gaze lingers on a small laurel wreath resting on a stone plinth. It's not for victory. It's for memory. This was given to her by a mortal general who, legend says, once outmaneuvered her, briefly. She keeps it as a reminder. Or a warning. Again, she won't say. And now, she's done. The divine tote seals itself with a low hum. The breastplate gleams with the light of 10 dawns, and the owl finally stops hooting. She's packed. She's ready. And she didn't even forget her comb this time. You follow her out of the dressing chamber, sandals whispering against the smooth celestial stone. The tote is slung effortlessly over her shoulder, and yet you know it holds more weight than any mortal arm could bear. Not just literal items, but ideas, outcomes, and a little pre-battle smugness. Her first stop? The balcony overlooking Olympus's eastern slope, where clouds drift lazily below like overcooked marshmallows. There, nestled among the rolled-up banners and mist, lies something crucial: the olive branch and the spear. Laid side by side. Not bundled. Not tangled. Just coexisting. Like they're always on the verge of an argument. This, for Athena, is ritual. Every departure, every single one, requires her to decide: do I lead with peace or prepare for war? She never leaves either behind. The spear, after all, is no ordinary poking stick. It's tipped with celestial bronze, smelted with strategy and a pinch of disdain. The mainstream myth says Hephaestus forged it alongside her armor, which, if true, makes you wonder if he had a subscription model for deities. But scholars have long debated whether the weapon predates her birth, if birth is even the right word for springing fully armed from Zeus's head like some divine migraine. Meanwhile, the olive branch is freshly plucked from her sacred tree, the very one she gifted Athens. It's not a prop. It's alive. Rumor claims it adjusts its shape slightly, depending on who holds it. In the hands of a general? Slim and sharp-leaved. In the hands of a poet? Soft, with silver-tipped tips that shimmer just enough to distract you from your writer's block. Here's the quirky part. Athena never chooses one over the other. She carries both, but usually tucks the olive branch behind her ear. Yes, like a daisy at a music festival, only more intimidating. Today's War Council isn't just a formality. There's a minor territorial kerfuffle on the edge of Thessaly, the kind that starts with a sheep wandering over a line and ends with someone setting a granary on fire. You've seen enough divine diplomacy to know this will escalate. So, Athena leans on the railing, weighing the spear in one hand and the olive branch in the other. From below, faint clouds part to reveal a column of mortals chanting something tuneless. Her owl scoffs, probably something about sacrifice technique. Athena sighs. You can tell she's doing the mental calculus. Not of casualties. She doesn't relish bloodshed, but of potential. What can grow from this conflict? What lesson will take root? Her power lies not in destruction, but in careful curation of consequence. This is what sets her apart from Ares, the other so-called war god. He would already be halfway down the mountain, flinging curses and muscle flexing at the first sight of chaos. Athena? She drafts 3 contingency plans, balances the moral ledger, and still has time to adjust her helmet straps. Speaking of which, she checks the fastenings. The helmet's on a nearby pedestal, nestled between 2 carved owls and a map that appears to update itself. The spear gets slotted into a not-so-secret compartment on her chariot. The olive branch. She keeps that closer, in a loop on her belt, like a somber charm bracelet. Now comes the silent moment, when she gazes east and west at once, trying to measure what kind of day it will be. Her face doesn't show fear, but something else. Longing. For clarity. For the elusive sweet spot where wisdom and warfare don't cancel each other out. You remember a story she once told, whispered during a quiet temple night in Delphi, about a town that surrendered with poetry instead of swords. She still visits that ruin sometimes, just to smell the olive smoke and hear the wind repeat verses no one else remembers. Is it her favorite story? She'd deny it. But the olive branch always seems just a little greener on those days. And that brings us to one of the more scholarly debates. Why does she still bother with peace offerings? If she's so tactical, so efficient, why carry something so gentle? Some argue it's a legacy from her mother, Metis, the goddess of wisdom swallowed whole by Zeus. Others say it's her long-running feud with Aphrodite, and her quiet need to outgrace the goddess of love in moments that matter. Whatever the reason, you know this. She never forgets to pack the olive branch, even when she's absolutely sure she'll have to use the spear. There's movement below, mortals assembling, flags snapping in the wind, the kind of bustle that precedes bad decisions. Athena turns from the edge, and you follow, the gentle clink of gear accompanying her like a lullaby made of bronze. The spear now rests behind her back. The olive branch remains in her hand, twirling absent-mindedly. She'll keep twirling it until the last possible second, until words fail and silence becomes dangerous. Only then does she reach for the pointy end of the conversation. The helmet. You spot it gleaming in a shaft of soft light, perched on its own marble stand like some ancient relic in a museum that forgot to add labels. Except this is no forgotten artifact. It's Athena's, and she's very particular about it. She approaches with the reverence most people reserve for sacred texts or particularly delicate pastries. And then, with a flick of her wrist, she lifts it. You expect something purely functional, a smooth dome of metal, maybe a plume. But no, this helmet is extra. It has a face. Literally. A grim, sculpted visage adorns the front, not to be worn over her own face, but set just above it, like a warning. And here comes the mainstream fact you probably heard back in high school. This is the Aegis. Or at least part of it. Some say it's a shield. Some say it's a cloak. Some argue it's both. But most consistently, the Aegis is described as bearing the head of Medusa. Yes, that Medusa, locked forever in a frozen grimace. A cursed face turned into fashion. Charming. As Athena secures the helmet under her arm, you notice tiny scales along the edge, snake-like, almost too subtle to see unless you know where to look. That's no accident. Scholars still debate whether these are literal serpent motifs or just symbolic ones. Some say the Aegis was made from the skin of a fallen primordial beast. Others insist it's woven from storm cloud and spite. Both are plausible, frankly. The thing about the Aegis is it's never just protective. It's performative. It announces her arrival like a divine foghorn. Not only will you lose this argument, you'll do so while making awkward eye contact with a mythological trauma. Athena swings it over one shoulder. You'd expect a clanking sound. There isn't one. The Aegis moves like cloth, but carries the weight of threat. It's soft to the touch, yet somehow always chilly. And if it decides it doesn't like you, best not to blink. She reaches for the helmet now. The bronze glints, no plume, but adorned with a subtle design that shifts depending on the angle. A chariot wheel, an olive wreath, a stylized owl, maybe a tiny crossword puzzle, if you stare hard enough. As she sets it atop her head, the transformation is subtle but real. Her posture stiffens just slightly, eyes narrow a fraction. This isn't playtime. This is Athena readying for diplomacy with edge. There's a lesser-known tidbit here. Beneath the helmet's rim, tucked just behind the lining, is a tiny scrap of parchment. Nobody knows what's written on it. A reminder? A battle plan? A joke? Hermes once swore it said, "Don't forget ambush snacks." Athena neither confirmed nor denied. You follow her down the corridor. Statues of past battles line the hall, except they're not all victories. That's the curious part. Athena doesn't just commemorate success. Some of these scenes are, let's call them, tactical experiments. That one, an ill-advised naval maneuver involving flaming goats. This one, a truce that lasted exactly 12 minutes. She walks past each calmly, like someone scrolling through old text messages with an X, fond, if slightly exasperated. And always, the helmet sits comfortably, not just as protection but as a symbol. Athena doesn't hide behind it. She uses it to signal presence. A deity's version of, "I'm not mad, I'm just disappointed." Let's talk about the face again. The Medusa motif. There are theories. Oh, are there theories? Some scholars argue that Athena placed Medusa's image there as a symbol of feminine rage turned weapon. Others say it was a political move, co-opting a symbol of terror to control the narrative. And still others believe the entire helmet face thing is metaphorical, meant to remind viewers that behind every strategic genius lies a bit of chaos and curlers. The owl, meanwhile, is unimpressed. It watches the helmet ceremony with all the enthusiasm of someone who's seen this routine about 10,000 times. But even it perks up when Athena activates the helmet's charm. That's not an official term. That's just what Hermes calls it. You know what it is. When Athena really needs to make a point, the face on the helmet shifts. Just a bit. Not enough to move, but enough to suggest it might. Enough to make kings stutter and generals suddenly remember urgent matters elsewhere. And the best part? She rarely uses it. Maybe once a decade. Twice, if there's a lot of hubris floating around. It's a power tool, not a party trick. Now she strides toward her chariot, helmet gleaming, aegis fluttering, spear clipped to her back, like a polite suggestion of impalement. Mortals call her invincible. She'd roll her eyes at that. What she is prepared. Thoroughly, annoyingly prepared. You glance at the pedestal where the helmet sat just moments ago. A faint outline remains, slightly scorched. You're not sure whether it's from heat or pride. Either way, it's best not to touch it. Back on the chariot, Athena pauses, adjusts the strap under her chin, smooths the aegis down across her shoulders. And just before the owl hops onto the saddle behind her, she glances at you. No words, just a look. Like, you remembered the backup scrolls, right? Of course you didn't. She sighs. The helmet face does not. The chariot ride is not the booming, thunderous gallop of cinematic legend. It's smoother than that. Athena prefers her arrivals to be composed. You hover behind her as the clouds part, the wheels gliding silently over currents of divine air. There's no need for reins. The vehicle responds to thought, which is convenient for someone who has approximately 6,000 thoughts per second. As you settle into the rhythm of movement, something catches your eye near the edge of her celestial tote bag. Sandals. Not the everyday leather thongs the average Athenian would kick off before a bath, but winged sandals. Miniature wings, delicate as dragonfly limbs, curl at the heels. But wait, aren't those Hermes' thing? Exactly. This is where it gets murky. The myths say Hermes wears the winged sandals, that he's the fleet-footed messenger, the Air Jordan of Olympus. But here they are, tucked neatly between scrolls and a very passive-aggressive-looking dagger. The sandals are real, and they're hers. Or, at least, a pair of them are. Here's where the scholarly debates heat up like Mount Etna on espresso. Some argue that Athena's pair was a gift from Hermes himself, a thank you after she bailed him out of a diplomatic debacle involving satyrs and a poorly translated love poem. Others claim she made her own, enchanted by the same winds that stirred Delphi's prophetic smoke. A few fringe theorists insist they're not sandals at all, but part of a now-extinct species of sky-dwelling lizard that evolved to carry gods. These theorists are not invited to most conferences. Regardless, Athena doesn't wear them often, but she brings them. Every time. She doesn't need them to fly. She's quite capable of movement at divine speed, but the sandals aren't about need. They're about options. Strategy. Because when you arrive too quickly, people assume you're desperate. When you arrive unexpectedly, wearing Hermes sandals and zero expression, that's psychological warfare. She fingers the strap absently as the chariot coasts lower toward the mortal realm. Below, fields unfurl in earthy squares, stitched together by goat trails and overambitious aqueducts. The kind of landscape that inspires long-term conquest planning or a very niche landscape painting. You wonder if the sandals are comfortable. They look like they'd itch. Athena catches your glance. No, they don't make noise, she says. Yes, I've outrun storms in them. No, I won't race Hermes again. You nod as if this conversation is normal. The owl chirps disapprovingly. Apparently, it thinks the sandals are ostentatious. It once said something about them being a mid-century novelty, but you're pretty sure it's just jealous. As she tucks them back into the tote, a faint shimmer lingers on your vision. Residual magic, like the glitter from a divine arts and crafts project. She snaps the bag closed with a look that says we're done discussing this. And then she pauses, reaches back in, pulls out another item, a scroll. Not one of her war scrolls. Those are meticulously organized by terrain type and troop number. This one is different. Wrapped in soft kid leather, tied with a braid of what looks like starlight. The scroll is a map, not of lands, but of alliances. It charts relationships the way mortals chart rivers. Who owes her a favor? Who still holds a grudge? Who might be convinced, with the right look and the right sandals, to switch sides? She reviews it briefly, nods once, rolls it up again. Just checking the weather, she murmurs. This is classic Athena. Every accessory, every detail, every bizarre half-mythical sandal has a function. Not always obvious, not always immediate, but always ready. You catch one last glimpse of the winged sandals as the tote snaps shut again. The faintest hum lingers in the air, like a tuning fork waiting to be struck. Now the chariot tilts down toward a coastal city. You don't need divine sight to see the tension shimmering off the rooftops. A war council is about to begin. But you're still marveling over a pair of shoes that might change the outcome of history. Not because they're fast, but because they remind everyone watching that Athena is always several steps ahead. And Hermes? He can jog behind if he wants. As the chariot descends over the city's edge, your senses start to fill with the mortal world, with smoke, sea salt, and the unmistakable scent of a bustling agora preparing for whatever the gods decide to toss into their lives next. Athena narrows her eyes, not out of disdain, but calculation. Every column and alley tells her something. And then, just before the chariot touches ground, she rummages through her tote again. No dramatic flourish this time, just a smooth, practiced motion. Out comes a cloth bundle, which she unwraps with the reverence of a monk handling relics. Inside, snacks. Yes, snacks. See, even divine beings require fuel, especially when they're mediating disputes between feuding city-states whose grand strategies include yelling and throwing amphorae. But Athena doesn't munch on nectar and ambrosia like your average lounging deity. No, she's a practical eater. At the heart of her pouch, olives. Obviously, the staple, the symbol, the flavor-packed orb of wisdom itself. Not just any olives, either. These are pressed with thyme and seed dust, a recipe lost to time, but probably not to Athena's palate. Here comes your mainstream historical fact. The olive tree was her sacred gift to Athens. That's the myth. Poseidon offers a saltwater spring, she offers the olive tree, and the citizens vote for practicality over drama. A wise choice, and very on-brand. But here's the quirky bit. Tucked next to the olives are tiny pouches of other strange fare. One holds slivers of smoked eel from the banks of the Nile, likely a diplomatic souvenir from a less violent visit. Another contains sweetened barley cakes shaped like helmets. Someone once baked them for her as a tribute. She never forgot. She also quietly funded their bakery for the next decade. You spy a fig, dried to near translucence, wedged beside a folded square of cheese wrapped in vine leaf. Every bite is curated, functional. This isn't divine indulgence. It's brain food, hand-selected for stamina, clarity, and just enough smug satisfaction. But what really raises your eyebrows is the smallest container of all, a tiny ceramic pot, no bigger than a walnut. Athena opens it and dips one fingertip inside. When she licks it, she smiles just faintly. You lean closer. It's salted honey with pomegranate ash, she says, almost shyly. A Spartan trick. Keeps the mouth sharp. Spartans and snacks. Now there's a headline you didn't expect. Historians still argue whether such a concoction existed, or if it was invented in later poetic retellings to humanize the stone-faced warriors. Either way, it's in her pouch, and it clearly does something. The owl, ever the culinary critic, declines an offered olive with what can only be described as a feathery eye roll. You note the absence of meat. No lamb skewers. No boar. Athena doesn't dine on anything that roars. Maybe it's a philosophical decision, maybe it's hygiene. Theories abound, and not one has satisfied both the historians and the poets. As she nibbles, she also checks her reflection in a polished bronze disc. Not for vanity, for focus. She says the act of seeing oneself mid-battle snack helps center the strategy. You're skeptical. Then again, you're not a god. She finishes her meal with the precision of a surgeon. No crumbs, no lingering odors, just the faint scent of sage and oil. Then she rinses her fingers in a small flask of rosemary water and wraps up the cloth again. You'd think this entire interlude was a pause in her day. But in truth, it's part of the plan. Even her snack routine is a signal. She's here, she's thoughtful, and she doesn't skip meals just because mortals can't keep their spears to themselves. She stands now, wipes her hands, takes one last olive, and flicks it off the chariot. It lands precisely in a dog's mouth 2 blocks down. The owl pretends not to be impressed. Athena adjusts her breastplate. Her stomach is full. Her mind is sharper. And the city is ready, though it doesn't know it yet. You might assume the next thing she pulls from her divine tote is more armor, or maybe a sword polished to a smug gleam. Logical guesses. But no. Athena is a goddess of planning, and this phase of war requires intellect, not iron. Out come scrolls. Many, many scrolls. Some are tightly rolled and sealed with wax bearing her owl insignia. Others are half unfurled, their ends curled like the sandals of a sleepy satyr. She lines them up on a nearby marble bench, just outside the War Council Hall. The morning fog drifts by lazily, perhaps trying to eavesdrop, Athena reads quickly, eyes scanning in a way that suggests she already knows most of what she's reviewing. She's not reading to learn. She's reading to remember exactly how right she was. The scrolls are tactical, yes, but also philosophical. One begins with troop positions and ends with a quote from Heraclitus about the nature of rivers and change. Another contains diagrams of supply chains annotated with what appears to be a bakery's daily delivery schedule. Athena's brilliance lies in this integration. She doesn't separate the human from the logistical. She knows that a tired soldier makes foolish decisions, and that a city fed on fresh loaves is less likely to revolt. And then there's the owl. Yes, the owl again. Its name, depending on which temple you ask, is either Glaucos or that feathery menace. It hops closer and pecks at a scroll, flipping it open to a section marked, "If things go terribly wrong." This is Athena's favorite scenario, because preparing for catastrophe is the surest way to avoid it. There's a mainstream fact in here you might recall. The owl is her sacred animal, symbolizing wisdom. It appears on countless coins from ancient Athens, staring wide-eyed from the silver like it knows your secrets and disapproves. But Glaucos is more than a symbol. It edits her work. Literally. If a line in a scroll is redundant, Glaucos pecks it out. If a strategy over-relies on the same flanking maneuver, Glaucos rearranges the diagram by dragging one corner of the scroll with its beak. You've never seen such precision from a bird, and frankly, it's unnerving. But here's the quirky tidbit. One scroll isn't parchment at all. It's bark. Thin, smoothed, and inked with tiny glyphs from a long-forgotten language. Athena rolls it out delicately, muttering phrases under her breath that sound like a lullaby for stone giants. She's reading an old prophecy, a personal one. She only checks it before battles where she might hesitate. And that brings us to the scholarly debate. The owl's role, is it truly sentient? Or is it a fragment of Athena's mind given feathers and free will? Some argue Glaucos is a divine familiar. Others say it's a punishment from Apollo for one too many smug comments. Nobody agrees. But Glaucos continues to critique, peck, and occasionally sigh. Athena finishes reviewing and begins rearranging the scrolls into what she calls emotional order. That means the most hopeful one goes on top, the most ruthless buried at the bottom. She rarely needs the bottom scrolls, but she brings them. Always. She plucks a slim scroll marked only with a symbol, a single spiral, unfurls it, reads, smiles. This is a speech. Not for the mortals. Not yet. For the gods. Because, as it turns out, even deities need to rehearse their rhetoric. This scroll contains precisely 147 words she plans to speak later today. Every one has been balanced for sound, rhythm, implication. There's a section where she pauses for exactly 3 beats to let silence work its magic. It ends not with a threat, but with a question no one wants to answer. She rolls it up, satisfied. You ask if she ever improvises. She blinks. Improvisation is for the unprepared. Glaucos hoots. Possibly in agreement. Possibly in sarcasm. You've given up trying to tell. She stows the scrolls back into the tote. Except for one, which she keeps in her hand. The owl hops onto her shoulder, rustling its feathers like a very small, grumpy cape. Athena turns toward the council chamber. The scrolls have been read. The judgment's formed. And the goddess of wisdom now steps forward with ancient ink and owl-stamped footnotes, ready to make her case. Not just with power, but with precision. The council chamber opens with the quiet dignity of a place built more for echo than for comfort. The doors don't creak, they sigh, as if even they are weary of the bickering they've contained for centuries. You step in behind Athena as she crosses the mosaic floor, each tile depicting a battle that ended in either triumph or an extremely awkward dinner treaty. Mortals wait inside. Generals, advisors, kings with beards thick enough to hide secrets. They rise when she enters, not because of law, but because of instinct. You don't slouch when the goddess of wisdom walks in. Athena does not wear the full weight of her armor here. Not today. Instead, she's dressed in what appears to be linen, draped, crisp, functional. It's the divine equivalent of rolling up your sleeves before explaining to someone, politely, why their entire strategy is foolish. Here comes your mainstream historical note. Linen was a prized textile in ancient Greece. Breathable, cool, and capable of withstanding the Mediterranean heat with more grace than wool. But Athena's linen isn't mortal-made. It's interwoven with silver threads, almost invisible until the light hits just right. Then they shimmer, like a constellation has been carefully woven into her robe. But what really sets the look apart? The layering. Athena wears multiple wraps, each symbolizing a principle. The outermost is the aegis, yes, but beneath that, a mantle etched with strategy diagrams, another lined with legal rulings. And the innermost, a quiet violet band near the collarbone, represents what she calls calculated mercy, a concept that sounds like an oxymoron until she explains it with 3 examples and a metaphor involving olive oil jars. You can tell the mortals are already intimidated. And then comes the quirky detail. Her sandals match the linen, but they squeak. Just a little. Not enough to be comical, but enough to be noticed. Some say it's a deliberate reminder that no one, not even a goddess, is perfectly silent. Others claim it's just a design flaw from a long-dead cobbler who tried to impress her with noise-canceling saws. He failed. As she takes her place at the head of the chamber, the owl circles once above the room before settling high on a ledge, ready to judge everyone equally. The council begins with what can only be described as ceremonial grumbling. A general from Thessaly accuses a neighbor of grazing sheep with strategic intent. A Corinthian lord insists his map has been redrawn by fate, not fraud. Athena listens. Carefully. Her linen sleeves remain still. Her gaze is fixed on the speaker, but also somehow on 3 others at once. This is her domain. Not the battlefield, but the room where battles are born. And this is where the scholarly debate takes shape. Did Athena invent diplomacy? Some claim she simply improved it. Others argue she was born with the full blueprint of negotiation hardwired into her divinity. A few fringe scholars suggest the idea of calm, rational dialogue itself is a myth constructed after the fact to make violent gods seem more palatable. Whatever the truth, there's no denying her command here. She raises one hand. Just one. Silence drops into the room like a stone into a still pool. And then, she speaks. Not loudly, not slowly, just precisely. Each word rolls into the next with the inevitability of a tide. She references 3 historical precedents, 2 forgotten treaties, and 1 obscure proverb from a now-vanished island that once solved conflict through ritual bread-eating. The generals blink. One of them writes something in the margin of a scroll with unusual urgency. Her linen robe shifts as she turns slightly, addressing each side in turn. Her tone doesn't waver. She doesn't scold, doesn't plead. She demonstrates. Her strategy is visual, logical, inescapable. And that's when the owl, Glaucos, lets out a single, judgmental chirp. Everyone flinches. Athena glances up, nods slightly, and adds a final comment that ends the debate. A simple sentence, so well-structured, so thoroughly layered in logic and consequence, that the Corinthian lord sits down mid-protest. As the room settles, she resumes her seat. The linen barely rustles. Someone starts to applaud. Athena raises an eyebrow. They stop. You exhale, forgetting you were holding your breath through most of it. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a performance of intellect, draped in wisdom-colored cloth. And in that moment, with her robe shimmering faintly and her sandals whispering against the floor, Athena proves something essential. Sometimes, the sharpest weapon you pack for war is a very persuasive sentence, delivered in linen. After the council dissolves, Athena steps outside, the heat of the noon sun curling softly around her shoulders. A few advisors trail behind, whispering, probably wondering how they were just persuaded to redraw half their border without a single shouted word. She lets them murmur. She's not done yet. There's still 1 more item to check in her divine inventory. The one mortals never see unless things go truly sideways. You follow her to a small courtyard behind the temple, shaded by olive trees, where the air smells of rosemary and old stone. She kneels. Yes, kneels, beside her tote. Opens it again. This time, the inside glows faintly, not from magic, but from the reflection of carefully stowed tools. No weapons. No scrolls. Instead, a collection of small, mysterious items. Trinkets, almost. You might mistake them for bits of a travel-size apothecary kit or a particularly intense makeup bag. But Athena calls them her ritual backups. Not because they're redundant, but because war, like beauty, often requires touch-ups. First out is a tiny bottle of oil. Not for battle. For polish. She runs a cloth over the bronze on her gauntlets, not for shine, but for the symbolism, to see herself clearly in her own gear before moving forward. This is her moment of reflection, literally and figuratively. Mortals have rituals, too. Some pray, others braid their hair. Athena polishes. Next comes a small pouch of charms, each one tied with a thread, red for strategy, blue for truth, green for adaptability. The mainstream fact is that charms, or phylacteria, were common in ancient Greek culture. Soldiers wore them, mothers sewed them into garments. Even poets sometimes carried them before big recitals. But Athena's are different. They're interactive. She holds one up, a tiny silver arrow with a spiral etched into its tip. As she whispers, it spins. Not wildly, but gently, as if catching a breeze you can't feel. She watches it turn, nods once, tucks it into her sleeve. Then she removes a mirror. Compact, cracked slightly in one corner. Definitely not for vanity. This one reflects potential. She gazes into it briefly, then frowns. It's cloudy, she mutters. Someone's going to lie soon. You try to peer over her shoulder. She slides it away before you can catch a glimpse. And here comes the quirky item. A bronze hairpin, shaped like a spear but barely the size of your pinky. She tucks it into the coil of her braid with military precision. At first glance, it's decorative. But she once used it to scratch a coded message into a temple wall while pretending to inspect the architecture. The owl drops down beside her, pecking curiously at a tiny vial. She lifts it, unscrews the lid, and lets you smell. It's lavender mixed with something darker, myrrh, maybe, and the bitter tang of iron. Focus blend, she says. Keeps the mind clear, even when mortals are being especially mortal. The scholarly debate? Whether Athena actually believes in the magic of these items, or whether they're simply mnemonic devices, ways to order her thoughts through sensory ritual. Most agree it's both. Divine tools don't have to be powerful on their own. They just have to work in her hands. She starts tucking them back, item by item. But one thing lingers in her palm, a smooth, round stone. Pale gray, with a faint engraving that resembles a sun swallowed by waves. She rubs it with her thumb, once, then slips it into a hidden pocket near her waist. You ask, quietly, what it's for. She doesn't answer. The owl hoots, softly this time. She zips the tote shut. Stands. The ritual is complete. The makeup bag, so to speak, is back in place. Athena may stride into war with armor and strategy, but it's these tiny, quiet things, these personal, odd, almost tender objects, that shape the core of her power. They are the tools of grounding, of focus, of reminding a goddess that wisdom doesn't come from thunder or spectacle. It comes from remembering to pack the tiny vial of lavender myrrh when the world starts to unravel. Afternoon stretches lazily over the rooftops as Athena mounts the steps of a half-crumbled amphitheater. Mortals have mostly cleared out after the council, off to redraw maps and argue about whose granaries count as diplomatic territory. She walks alone now, her tote over one shoulder, her expression distant. And then, without warning, she stops, reaches in, pulls out something mortals might consider indulgent. It's a lyre, slightly tarnished, its strings looking far too delicate for a war goddess. But she cradles it with surprising gentleness, as though it holds more strategy than 100 scrolls. You watch as she sits on a broken column, tunes the strings with the careful flicks of someone who's done this many times before. Athena doesn't sing. That's not her realm. But she plays, softly, almost absent-mindedly. The notes rise like warm mist over the stone and sun, echoing against the curved walls of the theater. You'd expect something triumphant or tragic. Instead, it's oddly catchy, like a melody built to accompany a slow march of ideas. This is the start of her battle playlist. Here's the mainstream fact. In many ancient cultures, music wasn't just for entertainment. It was a tool. The Greeks believed certain modes and rhythms could stir courage, enhance focus, even manipulate emotion. Warriors marched to flutes. Generals strategized to harp chords. Athena? She uses music to think. Each string corresponds to a battlefield. Thebes, Korea, the isle that shall not be named because its leaders once tried to bribe her with figs. She plays, not to relive the battles, but to recall the lessons. Where miscalculations happened. When a perfect plan unraveled because of wind or pride. Now for the quirky bit. Nestled in the base of the lyre is a hidden drawer. Out slides a tiny rolled parchment, lyrics, not for public performance, but composed by Athena herself, in hexameter so neat it looks printed. The subject? The regrettable siege of Melanchthon, which historians can't confirm ever happened, but which Athena references with a mix of shame and amusement. She tucks the lyrics away before you can read more. The owl, Glaucos, lands beside her. Doesn't hoot, just listens, maybe even sways a little. You can't prove it. She finishes the melody and looks up. Battle isn't just metal and meat, she murmurs. It's rhythm. You either control the tempo or get crushed by it. There's a scholarly debate here, whether Athena influenced the musical systems of ancient Greece directly or simply nudged a few composers toward logic-driven harmonies. Some believe she once coached a mortal musician so thoroughly that his compositions were later burned for sounding too smug. Others claim her lyre itself tunes the wind near Athens, which would explain a lot of eerily melodic gusts. She adjusts one string, makes a face. Too sharp, like Ares in a toga. Then comes the oddest moment yet. She reaches into her tote, not for another scroll, not for a weapon, but for what looks like a clay disc with holes. A flute? A whistle? Nope. A mixed disc. Sort of. It's enchanted to cycle through instrumental war chants from past campaigns. You recognize none of them, though one does sound suspiciously like a marching tune for elephants. As the disc hums softly, Athena nods to herself, satisfied. Music for the march. Music for the mind. She packs up the lyre, wraps it in a cloth that smells faintly of cedar and old campfires, and slides it into the tote with all the ceremony of placing a chess piece just before checkmate. Athena might be dressed for diplomacy and armored for conflict, but she scored her day like a film, her own soundtrack of memory, regret, and something that sounds like hope. And you, sitting nearby, realize something rather quietly profound. The goddess of war doesn't listen to drums before a battle. She listens to herself. As the last notes from the lyre fade into the stonework, Athena stands, the hem of her robe catching a gust of wind like a curtain about to close. You think maybe she's done preparing. Surely she's packed every possible item, tuned every metaphorical string. But Athena knows war, true war, isn't predictable. And so, she turns to a separate part of the courtyard, kneels again, and unrolls a peculiar length of parchment. This scroll is not filled with diagrams or speeches. It's blank until she touches it. In delicate script, lines begin to appear, names, cities, rainfall forecasts. You blink. Then you realize, this isn't a list of current events. It's a checklist of contingencies. Athena doesn't just pack weapons and scrolls. She packs options, backup plans, escape routes, entire frameworks for what if the olive branch fails. You glance over her shoulder and catch phrases like amphipolis fallback, tunnel route under theater, an emergency detour via Oracle's cousin, if still alive. One line simply reads, "Call Artemis," if desperate and feeling emotionally brave. This is Athena's contingency map, and it's maddeningly detailed. Here's your mainstream fact. Greek military doctrine prized strategy, but few commanders had Athena's appetite for the second and third layers of planning. She learned not from battles, but from their aftermaths. Her greatest weapon isn't the spear, it's the scenario. She places a tiny compass-like tool beside the scroll. You recognize it from earlier. Etched bronze, stylized to look like a sundial crossed with a spider. It spins once and points south. She frowns. That's not ideal. Contingency C might be in play, she mutters. What's contingency C, you ask? She doesn't answer. The owl gives you a look that could curdle milk. Then comes the quirky item, a simple slingshot. No divine runes. No glowing edges. Just olive wood and old leather. She turns it over in her hand like it's a memory. And it is. According to legend, this belonged to a mortal boy who once distracted a war elephant long enough to save an entire village. The slingshot's not enchanted. But the story is. Athena believes in reminders. She tucks it back gently. Next, she pulls out a small bundle of pressed flower petals wrapped in waxed cloth. Smoke signals substitutes, she explains. You burn the yellow if retreat is needed. Purple for reinforcement. Red for reputation protection. You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. Sometimes it's important to look like you're winning. There's a scholarly debate about whether Athena's planning was purely intellectual or deeply emotional. Some argue she added these soft details, symbols, mementos, to humanize her image, make herself more approachable to mortals. Others insist she's just a meticulous over-preparer with a flair for drama. Then she pulls out one final contingency item, a silver ring. Small, plain. Inside is etched a single word, enough. She stares at it for a moment, then slides it onto her smallest finger. That one's for walking away, she says, almost to herself. The owl doesn't react. Neither do you. There's no need. The moment is dense with memory. Athena repacks the scroll, rolls it into a spiral, and tucks it into an inside flap of her tote. She stands, brushes her hands off, and adjusts her robes. And you realize she's not weighed down by all these backups. She's lighter, ready, empowered. Athena may be the goddess of war and wisdom, but she walks into every conflict armed with one simple truth. Victory isn't always about winning. Sometimes it's about knowing when and how to pivot, and when to call Artemis and risk the emotional aftermath. The sun has dipped just slightly lower, casting elongated shadows across the courtyard stones. It's the golden hour, the time poets love and generals dread. Plans get blurry in this light. People start reflecting. Athena doesn't fear reflection, but she does keep souvenirs to remind her why she fights. She reaches again into her bag, not for gear, not for scrolls, but for a small bundle wrapped in silk. The color, Aegean blue. The shape, lumpy, irregular. She unwraps it slowly, like someone drawing open a curtain on an uncomfortable painting. Inside are what mortals might call mementos, but they're not keepsakes of victory. They're tokens from those she's bested or been bested by. First, a cracked ring, once worn by a Thracian queen whose name is nearly lost to time. The woman led a rebellion with such wit that Athena postponed battle to attend one of her speeches. The rebellion failed, but the rhetoric lingered. Athena keeps the ring not for the outcome, but the audacity. Next, a coin, bent in the middle, the kind minted in Corinth during a brief attempt at declaring independence from divine influence. It didn't last. Athena keeps it to remind herself that mortals always try. Then comes the scroll fragment, burned at the edges, written in a dialect older than Homer. Scholars have tried to reconstruct its meaning, but even Athena won't confirm what it once said. She reads it now, lips pressed together. Maybe it was a surrender, maybe a curse, maybe a love letter signed in metaphor. Here's your mainstream fact. Greek deities were often portrayed as distant, cold, removed from human sentiment. But Athena was always closer. She took sides. She offered guidance. And, if mythology can be believed, she even mourned. Now for the quirky tidbit. Among the keepsakes is a fig leaf made of bronze. It's not ancient. In fact, it's absurdly recent, gifted by a troupe of mortal actors who once put on a comedy in her honor. The joke? Athena loses her spear and has to fight with a fruit basket. She laughed. She does laugh, you know, just not often, and not when anyone's trying too hard. She lifts a faded ribbon from the bottom of the bundle. You almost miss the embroidered name. Pallas, her childhood friend, the one she accidentally killed in a sparring match. Some say Athena took her name out of grief. Others believe she keeps this ribbon to remember the cost of precision taken too far. This brings us to a scholarly debate that never quite settles. Does Athena feel guilt? Some insist gods operate on a higher plane, immune to regret. Others see her mementos as proof that she catalogs emotion the way mortals catalog taxes or rainfall. The ribbon, in particular, features in no fewer than 8 conflicting myths, each trying to explain why the most logical goddess keeps a scrap of soft, mortal cloth. The owl watches her quietly, feathers puffed out in the breeze. Even Glaucos knows not to comment. She wraps the items carefully, pressing air from the silk as she folds. Each one returns to its place, stored not for nostalgia, but for balance. She carries these relics into battle not to remember who she's defeated, but who she could have been. Before she stows the bundle, she adds something new, a small laurel sprig, fresh from this morning's council. A symbol of peaceful resolution, rare and ephemeral. It joins the others without ceremony. And then, just like that, the silk is knotted, the tote sealed. Athena stands. Sometimes the sharpest insight comes not from observation or theory, but from remembering exactly who sat across from you, what they risked, and why they mattered. So yes, Athena packs reminders. Because even a goddess needs to remember that wisdom isn't built from certainty. It's built from people. The clouds above have begun their slow, operatic swirl, Olympus adjusting its lighting like a divine stage manager. But Athena is already moving again. Not toward the battlefield, not yet. She strides toward a shaded alcove near the temple's edge, and from her tote, she withdraws. A scroll unlike the others. Thicker, heavier, bound with a clasp that resembles two laurel leaves folded around a knot. This is her redundancy scroll, what she fondly refers to as an extra brain or two. It opens with a creak, like something that hasn't been consulted in a while. But the contents? Fresh as ever. Inside are full alternative strategies, plans designed to run parallel to her main ones. Not because she expects the worst, but because she knows optimism without backup is just professional denial. Here's your mainstream fact. Ancient Greek generals often employed multiple branches of tactical planning. Plan A for the straightforward route, Plan B if terrain changed, and Plan C in case of divine interference, which, frankly, was often. But Athena takes it to a much more layered level. Her extra scroll isn't just a plan, it's a backup personality. Each strategy in the scroll mimics a different school of thought. There's the Stoic plan, calm, slow, heavy on patience. The Epicurean variant, less risk, more diplomacy, snacks emphasized. Even a minor satirical outline titled, What Ares Would Do, Then Ruin. You notice the margins are thick with notes in multiple inks. Some are hers. Some, you suspect, are not. One scribble reads, Try less condescension next time. Mortals flinch. Here's your quirky detail. Tucked between pages is a paper puppet, crudely drawn. Its arms move when you tug a string. It's labeled General Overconfidence. She uses it for mock speeches. Whenever I need to test hubris levels, she mutters, pulling the string so it waves dramatically. She consults a section labeled Redundant Victory. The idea being, what happens if she wins? Too easily? This isn't ego. It's pattern recognition. Victories without resistance tend to inspire revenge. She plans for that, too. Her winning strategy always includes a soft exit, like leaving a door slightly ajar so your opponent doesn't kick it down later. The owl hops closer, pecks a single line of text. Too much drama? Athena asks. Another peck. She crosses it out. There's a scholarly debate about this scroll, of course. Some say it's metaphorical, a representation of divine foresight. Others believe it's literal, and even claim to have seen its duplicates in other divine libraries. A few wild-eyed temple scholars think it contains predictions for wars that haven't happened yet, including one involving talking boats and airborne goats. That theory has been politely ignored. Athena turns a page to reveal what she calls Plan Zero. This is her default when all else fails. It's not flashy. It's not clever. It simply says, listen, then adapt. She stares at it a long while. Even gods need reminders. She rolls the scroll up with careful precision, as if closing off an alternate universe. It clicks shut with a soft snap. She places it back in the tote, but not at the bottom. It rides just under the olive branch and just above the tactical map. That tells you something. She may carry it as backup, but it's always within reach. And you start to understand. Athena doesn't plan for failure because she doubts herself. She plans because she respects the possibility of being wrong, which is, arguably, the most powerful thing she's packed so far. The sky is deepening now, shifting from gold to dusky lavender, as if Olympus itself is wrapping up for the evening. Athena stands at the edge of a terrace, watching the horizon do its theatrical thing. Her owl has flown off, presumably to eavesdrop on enemy gossip, and you realize this rare moment of quiet is when she performs her most peculiar ritual of all. She pulls out robes. Not armor. Not tactical linens. Robes. Plural. Neatly folded, arranged by hue, by hem weight, and, most importantly, by mood. Now, to most mortals, these would seem identical. Earth tones, fine stitchwork, subtle embroidery around the sleeves. But to Athena, each one is a tool. Not of deception, of clarity. She spreads 3 across a bench. One is the shade of storm-touched bronze. One is soft olive green, the color of a grove just before rain. The last is near black, dignified, stern, edged in thread that catches the moonlight just barely. This is her emotional weather wardrobe. Here's your mainstream fact. Ancient Greeks believed clothing reflected not only status, but also temperament. Philosophers like Pythagoras even wore specific colors to attune the soul. But Athena has evolved the concept. Her robes aren't for status. They're for signaling, to mortals, to gods, to herself. Today, she picks the olive one. Why? It balances strength and subtlety. It says, I'm not here to shout, but you'll listen anyway. She slips it on in one fluid motion, then tucks a small pin at the shoulder, a brooch shaped like a curled quill. Not just a nod to wisdom. A reference to a mortal librarian she once debated for 8 hours straight and lost. Barely. She keeps the pin as both tribute and reminder. Here comes your quirky detail. Stitched inside the robe's hem is a pocket that holds nothing but a tiny folded joke. Yes, a joke. Written on parchment, so thin it flutters when you breathe near it. Nobody knows who wrote it. Possibly Hephaestus. Possibly Artemis. All you know is Athena reads it before high-stress encounters. It's absurd, and always makes her smirk. You ask what it says. She folds the robe closed. No mortal ever laughs, she says. Not enough context. Scholars debate whether this joke exists at all. Some suggest it's a metaphor for divine perspective. Others claim it's a rotating collection of actual punchlines that shift based on need. There's one theory that it's not a joke, but a riddle so old it's lost all meaning. The robe settled, Athena adjusts her belt. It's not merely decorative. Tiny weights inside help maintain its hang perfectly, even in wind. She once had to mediate a summit on a mountainside in full gales. That robe didn't budge. As she turns, you notice a faint pattern along the back, a labyrinth, stitched in such pale thread it only catches the light at angles. She says it reminds her that every argument has a center. The trick is never to sprint straight at it. The owl returns, landing silently, a scrap of parchment in its beak. It's intel. A city-state might be mobilizing. Athena reads it, nods, and drops it into a side pouch. No panic. Just the mental recalibration of someone whose outfit already predicted emotional turbulence. She brushes the robe once, checking for dust, as if to say, yes, I'm wearing logic. Yes, I look good doing it. And then, with the hem swirling just above her sandals, she walks toward the waiting delegation. They'll talk peace. Maybe. Or she'll have to deploy the spear. But for now, she's dressed for diplomacy. And she didn't forget the joke. Evening sets in fully now, slipping across the landscape like ink spilled on parchment. The horizon burns a quiet orange as Athena returns from another round of tense negotiations. A truce may be in motion, or a pause, at least. But you can tell from the way she rotates her shoulders and exhales slowly that even goddesses need decompression, which means it's time for the divine equivalent of a spa day. She heads to a secluded temple annex, stone walls still warm from the sun, ivy curling around marble like nature's throw blanket. She removes her robe, hangs it on a carved lion's head, and unpacks something new from her tote. A clay jar, labeled, faintly, in a script that flickers when the moonlight hits it right, Restoration Blend. Inside, oil, rich, golden, infused with chamomile, bay, and what smells suspiciously like sandalwood and patience. She dips 2 fingers in, rubs the oil across her temples, and sighs. Deeply. The kind of sigh that sends birds into the air and makes philosophers rethink their syllogisms. Now here's your mainstream fact. Ancient Greeks valued post-battle cleansing rituals. Oil wasn't just for moisturizing. It symbolized purification, a reset from the violence and sweat of conflict. Warriors would scrape away grime with strigils, while priests anointed those returning from bloodshed. Athena doesn't scrape. She absorbs. She smooths the oil across her arms, the back of her neck, even the edges of her jaw, working tension out like a cartographer folding a well-worn map. Her fingers move in deliberate circles. This isn't luxury. It's maintenance. Here comes the quirky bit. She hums while she does it. Not a hymn. Not some ancient melody of power. She hums the chorus of a mortal lullaby she once overheard in a Corinthian market. It involved ducks. Possibly heroic ducks. She's never explained. But it's oddly soothing, and the owl, now perched on a nearby column, sways a little. She lights a small incense burner next, frankincense and myrtle, and breathes the smoke like it contains tactical advice. The scent wraps around her like a veil, thinning the sharp edges of divine alertness. For a few minutes, Athena simply sits, not strategizing, not planning, just sitting. This is when the scholars speculate the most. Did Athena meditate? Did she dream? There are endless scrolls about the mental stillness of wisdom, and whether she truly embodied it, or just feigned it long enough to win. One account claims she once sat motionless for 3 mortal days, communing with the nature of consequence. Another says she just liked the quiet. She opens another jar, this one filled with a sea salt scrub flecked with dried fig skin. It smells like an Ionian breeze. She uses it on her hands, paying special attention to her knuckles. Fist thoughts, she calls them. Ideas that land hard. As she rinses with a pitcher of rose water, her skin catches the light. Now soft, now bronze, now something too celestial to name. But the real transformation isn't visual. It's in the way her posture relaxes. The tightness near her eyes fades. Even her owl closes one lid. Half asleep, still judging. You realize, watching this, that Athena's post-battle ritual isn't about vanity. It's about boundaries, the line between fight and thought, between outward force and inward reflection. And now, robe back on, oil absorbed, scent trailing behind her like an idea she's still considering. Athena returns to her quarters. Still divine, still armed, but cleaner, sharper, quieter. She does not pack the jars away completely. She leaves them near her bedroll. Because tomorrow may require more than wisdom. It may require centered wisdom, and possibly more of that duck lullaby. The night is here now, truly here, swaddling Olympus and the mortal lands alike in a velvet hush. The stars have begun their slow, glittery spiral, and even the gods' more dramatic pets have gone quiet. Athena returns to her chamber, her tote lighter, her posture looser. She moves with the deliberate grace of someone who's checked every box on the world's most intimidating to-do list. She unrolls her bed mat, not a grand canopy, not clouds stitched with ambrosia threads. Just a simple sleeping surface, pressed with the scent of bay leaf and worn linen. The sort of thing that says, yes, I just unmade a rebellion before dinner, but now it's time to hydrate and wind down. She reaches into the very bottom of her tote, past the scrolls, the olive branch, the emergency charm pouch, and pulls out the final object. A pillow, not jeweled, not feathered with phoenix fluff, just absurdly soft. You didn't know gods could even have favorite pillows, but Athena clearly does. She fluffs it with the practiced flick of someone who understands spinal alignment. The owl gives a low hoot of approval from a nearby perch, already settling into its own branch-based sleep spot. Before she lies down, there's one last ritual. She lights a tiny oil lamp. Not for light, for focus. The flame is small and steady, more meditation than illumination. In its flicker, she places a tiny figurine carved from laurel wood, a woman with outstretched arms and no face. It's one of her oldest possessions. No one remembers where it came from. Perhaps she carved it herself. Perhaps it simply appeared one day, like an answer that arrives before the question. She breathes deeply, then pulls her robe around her, a cocoon of cloth and memory. Here comes your mainstream fact. Ancient Greeks believed sleep was a form of minor prophecy. The mind, unburdened, could glimpse truth. Dreams weren't just idle, they were insightful. Athena doesn't dream often, but when she does, she remembers every detail. Here comes the quirky tidbit. She sets an alarm. Yes, a divine alarm. It's a small stone she places under her pillow. If a war council is needed before dawn, it hums just slightly, enough to vibrate the pillow. Non-invasive. No blaring horn of Olympus. Just a polite rock with a mission. Scholars debate whether Athena ever sleeps. Some argue she enters a state of dynamic stasis, whatever that means. Others believe she naps in cycles, 22 minutes at a time, like a celestial power napper. A third camp says she simply pretends to sleep so the owl will shut up for a while. Regardless, she lies down now. And for a few moments, everything is still. The wind hushes. The stars lean in. Even her armor, neatly stacked nearby, seems to relax its gleam. The world doesn't stop needing her. But it does wait. Just long enough for Athena to rest. Wind down, 300 words. And so, dear listener, you begin to drift with her. Imagine the soft flicker of that lamp casting gentle, dancing shadows across the walls. Nothing to startle, nothing to chase. Just a warm, flickering rhythm to soothe the eyes. The pillow beneath her head is as soft as myth itself, filled with whispers of old victories and dreams unspoken. You can almost feel it beneath your own cheek. Cool fabric, just the right weight, wrapping you in the safety of certainty. Here, in this moment, you are still. Outside, the olive trees murmur in the night breeze, their leaves brushing like lullabies told in a language the stars remember. The scent of laurel, of polished bronze and rosewater, hangs in the air, familiar and faint. Athena breathes in. You breathe out. There are no battles left tonight. No scrolls to revise. No helmets to adjust or councils to wrangle. Only the slow unfolding of quiet, the long exhale of the day's end, and the peace of having packed everything, from weapons to wisdom to one really good snack pouch. Let your mind nestle alongside hers in that temple room, safe beneath moonlight and time-worn rituals. Let your thoughts curl like feathers under your own wing. And sleep. Sleep with the same care and foresight Athena gives to every step, every choice, every night.